too, that his friends got a mention.
It's all anecdote, right?
Yeah.
This is very Trump.
Yeah, the one I like was Mr. Trump also ordered a review of the controversial Obama-era rule that would force investment advisors to act in the best interest of their clients. Hey, very controversial.
Yes, as a customer, one would hope so. But what difference will this mean then to the rest of us? If the idea was that it was supposed to put safeguards in place so we didn't have the kind of financial crisis that we had in 2008.
Well, the conclusion is pretty obvious, right? You know, on balance, it does open up the system to more cracks like this.
But certainly in Europe, weren't they?
Yeah.
The banks were expected to hold more capital so that there was more elasticity in the system.
Well, and that's another very interesting thing about what he's doing, is that there have been communications between certain Republicans in Congress and with the US Federal Reserve, which is the central bank there, saying, actually, we want you to be independent of global frameworks around capital. And so all of a sudden, the kind of international agreements that have held together the global banking system since the collapse of 2008, everything is being called into question. Is the US with us on all this regulation, or are they going to go out on their own?
What does it mean for London? Does it mean that potentially people who are in London at the moment might move back to the US because it was a laxer regime, or...?
It certainly opens up the possibility that certain things will be allowed in one jurisdiction and not allowed in another. Brexit is a whole extra kind of layer of complexity on top of this. But it certainly opens up the possibility that you could have pockets of risk around certain types of risky lending that are more accentuated in one country over another. So it's fascinating what he's doing here.
And we even understood some of it, didn't we?
Well done.
Thank you. The Times, China cash link to top Labour MP, £180,000 fund for a pro-Beijing shadow minister. This story has been written by Oliver Wright and his colleague Hannah McGrath. Tell us more. Who is this shadow minister?
This is Barry Gardiner, who is Labour's shadow international trade secretary. And what we discovered, and it has been declared, I should say that, is that over the last year and a half or so, he has received around £180,000 in staff costs, i.e. money that someone else has paid him so he can employ staff. And this money, or in kind, has come from a firm of lawyers who also act as legal advisors to the Chinese embassy in London and have quite significant contacts to Beijing. A little bit more than that, the woman who founded the firm, who runs the firm, her son has been working in Barry Gardiner's Westminster office and being paid for by her to work for him. And obviously, you know, as we say, there's no suggestion of impropriety, but people in the Labour Party are worried, and they say, you know, it doesn't look good. Here you've got a guy who's representing the Labour Party talking about things like trade, of which China is a huge part, and indeed energy, of which China is a huge part, and yet you've got this sort of perception that things aren't quite right, and should he be putting himself in that kind of position?
But if there's no suggestion of impropriety, what, if anything, can and should be done about it?
Well, it's difficult to say, but you know, as Ollie is saying, it very much comes down to, you know, perception and this kind of, you know, idea that, you know, what has the influence been? It sounds like this MP has been, he's been quite sort of fulsome in his praise for Hinkley Point, which has links obviously to, you know, the Chinese input and the investment there. And his own party sound uncomfortable with the relationship.
I mean, I suppose the point about impropriety is the reason there's no impropriety is because it's not specifically banned in the rules. Now, the question is, should the rules allow someone to, you know, get their staff paid in this way, where they're not actually working for them or the taxpayer, but they're working for someone else who's paying them? But there is nothing in the rules to stop this, so that's where we are.
Let's just look at the Telegraph, a couple of stories here. Firstly, Europe talks tough to Trump. It goes both ways, doesn't it, this? Donald Trump talks tough about Europe and NATO. It's his turn to be on the receiving end.
Yeah, Theresa May, I think, has had a little bit of a tough time.
In Malta.
In Malta, yeah. She has been, in a way, Donald Trump's self-declared emissary, sort of explaining the Donald to the rest of Europe, and the rest of Europe haven't been massively impressed with the Donald or indeed Theresa. She was supposed to have a sort of one-on-one with Angela Merkel. That was sort of cancelled at the last minute. It was spun that, well, they'd had a walk in the garden and they'd discussed everything that was needed to be discussed, so there was no need for the one-to-one, but you have to slightly question that. But, you know, the British government, the British state, are in quite a difficult position on this because Trump has declared repeatedly that he's no lover of the EU, but he's very happy to cosy up to Britain. And I think it's quite hard for us to play the role of sort of his interpreter when he's made his views so abundantly clear and he's utterly unpredictable.
There's supposed to be some kind of improving of relations prior to Brexit so that we get everyone on side. But it doesn't sound from this article that that's really been happening, does it? If she's threatening to slash taxes and undercut the EU.
Well, this has been rumbling on for a few weeks, really stemming from comments that the Chancellor Philip Hammond made. It is possible that, you know, as a way for the UK to remain competitive, that we might start cutting taxes. Well, the Eurocrats are saying, we're not stopping you from cutting your taxes as it is. I don't really understand what the issue here is.
But Jeremy Corbyn in particular has talked about his fear of Britain racing to the bottom. Once we're outside the EU, if we don't have to be subject to all sorts of employment regulations, that protection for workers and that kind of environmental standards, then there will be this sort of diving down.
I think it's an empty threat, but it's quite a clever threat because I think, you know, if you think about what we know about German domestic politics or French domestic politics, the answer is not a huge amount. The truth is Theresa May and all her emphasis on the just about managings and, you know, promising that employment rights will be the same, practically she can't do anything, but the Europeans sort of think we might. And I think it's a negotiating stance. We need a threat. And that's how she's trying to position it. But would she do it? Could she do it? I mean, I don't think so.
It's certainly gone down very badly on the continent, this possibility that we might do it.
But they also don't want it. And, you know, to try and tie us in, if we say, well, actually, yes, we'll agree to stick by all the sort of common European regulations and taxes, and we won't become this tax haven at your border, that could potentially be something that they would be more likely to give us the kind of free trade access on services and goods that ideally we would like. Possibly not, I don't know, but
maybe.
Stay with the Telegraph. Good grief. No wonder I was off last week. Get building or lose planning. This is so that 1 million more homes are built. We've been promised a lot more homes for donkey's years, haven't we?
Yes, it's the national obsession with house prices. And one obvious way to tame house prices is to have more houses.
Supply and demand again.
That, you know, that'll call me old-fashioned, but yes, so the story here is saying to developers, you know, you've got your planning permission, use it or lose it, get on with it, build some houses. The Tories have promised that the country will build 1 million new homes by 2020. So
that's a lot of new homes.
Better get cracking. And the number of empty homes in the UK is apparently the highest in 20 years. 1.4 million empty homes. It just seems crazy.
I mean, a lot of those will be just investment properties for people, won't they? They don't. If you park a lot of money in property, you don't necessarily even need to.
Is that
rent
empty or is that sort of mainly empty? That's what I don't quite understand. Is it people who've got holiday homes and go for weekends but are predominant? What's the definition?
Don't know. It doesn't explain that, does it? Very good question, Ollie. If only we knew. Is the land available in the right places for the? Because and then you get into the argument about: do you want to build on your green belt? Do you want to be building on the countryside? Are you building in the right places where there is infrastructure?
But in these cases, these are plots of land where permission has been given. It's not about seeking permission for new bits of land to build flats on. This, you know, the permission's there. Get on with it.
I mean, but these companies will not want to do it because, as you go back to the supply and demand, they want to have these houses coming out at a steady rate, at a steady price. The last thing they want is the prices falling. The government is going to have a battle on their hands if they.
Once you've built a house, you have to light and heat it.
Smoothly
Terrible,
done.
isn't it? I blame Ralph, who's producing tonight. He gave me that link. Kind of. Daily Mirror. Fury, £109 a year electric rise. This is N-Power, who's hiking its bills outrageously, says the Mirror.
Yeah, I mean, and they will just be the first. Yeah, we know how the big 6 power firms operate. One, I don't know whether they draw lots for it, but one of them goes first and takes the heat, and then all the others follow. So it may, even if you're not an N-Power customer, this kind of price rise is probably coming to you, not too far off, I would imagine.
This is the standard rates, though, that they're putting up, that you really don't need to sit on, do you, as a customer? If you're prepared to sort of look around and find a different deal, you can lock yourself into a fixed rate.
It should be easier these days to jump around from one provider to the other. And it's worth pointing out, actually, this is 15% on your electric, but the dual fuel package, I think, has gone up by just under 10%, which is, you know, slightly less scary. So there are definitely ways to shop around, but there's no getting around the fact that wholesale energy prices have gone up since October, November.
But they buy their stuff ahead of time, don't they? Buy their gas and electricity.
It always only ever feels like they're putting the prices up, right? And you know, and that exactly goes back to what we were just saying, which is that, you know, there is a first mover disadvantage here. They're all going to have to do it. It's a fib to suggest that they're not. So it is about just who goes first and who gets the nasty headlines. And today, I'm afraid, Empower, that's
Empower
you.
For it. They drew the short straw.
Yeah.
Well, took the leap first. Another consumer story on the Daily Mail. The veg shortage worsens. Rationing and panic buying is spreading. You can't even buy certain veg online.
I mean, bulk buying veg that goes off in 3 days seems like the most ludicrous kind of bulk buying you could possibly imagine.
You
They're sort of binging on these.
You can't freeze an iceberg lettuce, can you? Despite its name.
So, yeah, as it says here, so it must be true, as does customers will not be able to buy more than 6 of each item at its
Do you want 6
outlets.
aubergines?
Who
6
needs,
iceberg lettuces?
Who, unless you're running a kebab shop, who buys 6 iceberg lettuces at one go?
Well, the shortage is caused, of course, by snow and floods in Spain, which is where they grow a lot of this stuff at this time of year. Begs the question about Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall would approve seasonal eating, doesn't it?
Eat seasonal.
Root veg,
Yeah.
which you don't need to import from places like Spain.
Yeah, yeah. But people have come so used to being able to get everything all year round, and you know, a few decades ago that wouldn't have been possible. If it would have been possible, it would have been extremely expensive. But now we expect to, you know, have tomatoes that taste of tomatoes 12 months of the year.
But I mean, this kind of story, does it make matters worse? Everybody reads this and think, I better go and buy something I didn't even necessarily knew I wanted.
If people are running to the shop to buy their permitted 6 icebergs and 6 broccolis and 6 aubergines, then good luck to them.
Yeah, they'll be very healthy if they eat it all, won't they? And lost a lot of weight for this time of year. Thank you very much. Don't forget, you can see all the front pages of the papers online on the BBC News website. It's there for you 7 days a week at bbc.co.uk/papers. If you missed the programme, I know you wouldn't there, but you can watch it later on iPlayer. Thank you, Ollie, Katie. Nice to have you here. See you in a minute.